Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Barbarian, and today we're going to take a look at the upcoming content for Victoria 3. I am very excited for it, I'll tell you that outright. It is coming on the 6th of May and it is 1.7, so the free patch, plus of course Sphere of Influence, the very first major expansion for Victoria 3. It brings massive ownership changes, it gives you power blocks, it gives you more activity when it comes to diplomacy and so on, and I think all of these things are exactly what I like to see. Not to mention, of course, foreign investment. Now before we jump into this, and trust me, it will be quite a video, because of course there is already a ton of information, although they are going to publish more every week, and I will cover that as well in individual videos, so make sure to follow the channel here. I want to quickly dip into a different topic, because it's kind of related. Maybe for just 1 minute, let's talk about 1.6. 1.6 is the update that came out not too long ago, and it was mostly something meant to fix stuff. And it did. I mean, the outliner now is absolutely amazing. There are various other, of course, UI-related changes. I honestly think UI is doing an amazing job at this point. They really struggled because this is a difficult game to make UI for, but yeah, I really love what they did there. Nonetheless, it has to be said that patch also just fixed a whole bunch of stuff up, or at least intended to do it. And it did, but also there are, yet again, many more oversights. For example, sometimes in Africa your troops can get stuck, you know, if you want to get to a front line or back. Sometimes troops can just go through enemy territory to go to a front line that is otherwise just isolated. And, well, at the end of the day, migration when 1.6 came out was also busted, which was a big topic, because 1.6 reworked migration to be more performant. Many of these things have now been fixed in a hotfix that came roughly a week after 1.6, but it's a pattern, right? We're looking at Victoria 3 and it's incredibly complex, but every single patch is before the hotfix for the patch. And the first hotfix, of course, is just before the second hotfix. I mean, not in this case, I'm being a bit cynical here, but I hope you get my drift. When I talk about 1.7 and the features coming, I will sound excited. But I do want to put a bit of a caveat there, because I am quite concerned that maybe 1.7 comes out and it just doesn't work, and we have to wait until June or maybe even later to actually play the game proper. I hope that won't be the case, but I want to communicate the sentiment, because as much as I'm excited for the features, I'm not excited for that particular part of the Victoria 3 experience. Of course, ultimately, I hope that 1.7 comes out and it just works flawlessly, but I wanted to bring it up because it's a bit of a pattern for Victoria 3. And if I sound very positive and if you're very excited for the upcoming update, just keep in mind that I'm skeptical whether you will be able to play it right when it comes out. There may be some issues attached there. Alright, and with that, let's talk about the actual features, because like I said, many of them are rather exciting. First of all, we have power blocks. Power blocks are a DLC feature coming with Sphere of Influence, and they are of course incredibly interesting. Power blocks will be multinational associations that can be formed by high-ranking countries, and which take a variety of forms based on their identity and principles. Identities are set when they're formed, while principles can be added and removed over time. You can see them right here in this screenshot as well. Of course, this menu is work in progress, but there can be a variety of, different power blocks, like, for example, just you wanting to vassalize an empire under your control, and then on the other hand, maybe just a customs union. The very interesting part here for me personally actually was that a power block might take the form of a single great power and countries under its influence, a multilateral military alliance between several major or greater powers, or an economic cooperation with numerous countries in a unified market. I am surprised by this. When they announced this content, I personally thought that they ultimately just meant, okay, what we're doing here is you building an empire, and I was fine with it, right? If I am clearly declaring that all of these nations are in my power block, then it's very easy to do power block diplomacy, for example, for international treaties or for the League of Nations. That stuff won't be in 1.7, but I was looking at this and I was saying, hey, that's quite exciting. I didn't think it would, for example, be possible to, well, create the literal World War I blocks, but this very much sounds like it, right? They are saying that several major and / great powers can form a multilateral military alliance, which, well, that's the Entente, and that is, of course, the Mittelmächte. So, hey, I'm actually positively surprised there for sure. I thought it would just be empire building and either friendly or unfriendly, but it doesn't look that way. Now, mind you, what I'm still cautious of is the relation here with the economic cooperation with numerous countries in a unified market, because to be a market, you have to have a market leader, which basically is the great power or major power and so on. My dream here would be, of course, that this could mean minor powers just allying up, basically, right? And just sticking together, but I assume that there has to be a great power involved. We're going to see more, of course, in the weeks to come, so hey, that is just my speculation right there. Power blocks also have leverage on countries outside the bloc, including members of other blocs, and can use that leverage to entice and cajole them into the power bloc. Being part of a power bloc comes with both benefits and obligations, and members are at risk of having their internal politics meddled with by the leader of the bloc. We can see here it sounds very top-down for sure. We can also actually see in this screenshot right there, and I asked this in the Discord, basically the waves that you are seeing here in Central Asia, and that, might I just point out, also actually include a decentralized nation, are essentially radiating out of St. Petersburg, so the capital of the power bloc. This, I assume, is what they call leverage. I'm very curious what you can do with leverage. It sounds very much like Victoria 2's concept, of course, of, well, influence and the sphere of influence, but yeah, that is of course kind of the namesake as well. I would hope that we're looking at leverage and that maybe it is a currency that both sides can utilize. So for example, maybe if I'm a neutral nation, I can utilize leverage and make sure you know, hey, that I don't owe you as much if I do you a favor somewhere else. In general, I think Victoria 2 is of course an inspiration here, but with power blocks now being something that is much more formalized, I think that there is a lot more that you can do there. I also am kind of reminded, frankly, of the EU4 favor system. How exactly this works though, well, we shall see. Power blocks in general sound interesting. I was hoping, I'll be honest with you, that when we had this announced, that power blocks would maybe also be a bit more softer in their implementation, so that, for example, instead of, hey, it will always be power block versus power block later on, we could also say, okay, the German Confederation could be a power block, even if very decentralized, or the League of Nations, or an international treaty banning piracy, and so on. All that stuff clearly is not in, that is not a feature of power blocks, but I was looking at this and I really just want to reiterate, I actually think power blocks are great stepping stones towards this, because if I can clearly define in which sphere and in which power block I am, then that also defines which treaties I will be adhering to and which treaties I won't be adhering to. Very interesting stuff for sure, but let's move on from there. Let's get right into interest group lobbies. These will also of course come with sphere of influence, so the DLC itself. Interest groups can join lobbies with specific foreign policy agendas centered around other countries. These lobbies form organically as the result of a new system of diplomatic catalysts. A lobby friendly to Great Britain might form after the signing of an alliance with them, while a lobby hostile to Austria might spring up after being defeated by them in a war, all depending on a variety of diplomatic and political conditions at the time the catalyst occurred. Lobbies will try to promote or counter the interests of foreign powers, and will help or hinder your diplomatic efforts based on whether your goals align with their own. Lobbies that are friendly to a specific foreign power can smooth the way for diplomatic agreement that would otherwise not be possible. The last part here is especially interesting to me because this wasn't at least directly apparent from the screenshot that you can see right here as well. We can tell that lobbies will be something that exists with interest groups, of course, and you will get negative and positive modifiers on whether these interest groups approve of you, depending on the actions you take. I'm quite interested in this. We have the very, very great example of Greece. Of course, Greece had the Russian, the French, and the English parties that basically were just lobbies for those countries because, well, they were being paid for by them. Hey, somebody has to pay for the Greek economy at the end of the day. They just got independence. We can see such a diplomatic catalyst right here. We have, for example, the Social Democrats that want to appeal to the establishment in broad, and because of that are saying we stand in opposition to communism. So they are directly splitting here from the communist trade unions in the Soviet Union. Seeking to escape accusations of communism by drawing a hard foreign policy line, the social democratic leadership of the trade unions have laid the groundwork for a lobby to oppose Soviet interests. And then a new anti-country lobby, political lobby, is created targeting the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. I really like this. We have talked about this for ages now. We need more impact in the internal and foreign politics, vice versa, right? So in both directions there, and this directly seems to be it. Foreign events will impact us and we will impact foreign events. I will admit that the only thing that I don't like just looking at this and in its implementation is that the interface is kind of sucky. It doesn't look big, it doesn't look nice, it doesn't look glorious, but other than that, the functionality seems nice. Now the next topic here is foreign investment. This one is a feature that is split in the DLC and in the free update. Let's take a look. Foreign investment makes it possible for both government and autonomous private investors to construct building levels in other countries and enjoy the profits generated. To construct in another country, you need to have a certain diplomatic pact in place, or otherwise be a part of a power bloc that allows such construction. If you do not own sphere of influence, you will still be able to do foreign investment in your subjects, so it is just very limited, but it will still be there. I'm gonna be honest with you, I marked this red, but I must have immediately forgotten that Wow, they are adding government and autonomous private investment for foreign investments. When this first was announced, I was discussing this on the Discourse with some other people, and we all thought, just from the looks of it, that this would essentially be pure government-driven investment. But apparently, autonomous private investors are also allowed to construct buildings in other countries. That is exciting. This feature, I don't think I have to justify it. I don't think I have to discuss why it's a good feature. Everybody knows that it's just better if you can help the AI a little bit, if you need a particular resource that you can extract from there. And it also, of course, actually works hand in hand. In the past, before this 1.7, if you build something in another country, you would literally build it for that other country. That would just make other capitalists rich instead of your capitalists. With the way it works now, and we are going to see this of course in a second when we get to that part of this dev diary, you will be building these things and then it will be owned either by you directly, the state, which means you get the dividends, or of course by the capitalists in your country. Wealth extraction has never been this beautiful. I am really looking forward to this. I think this is a great implementation, and my god, I will absolutely love making other countries richer while they just make me even richer. Foreign investment sounds great, and of course the devil there is in the details. We got a couple of screenshots as well. Let's take a look at those. You can see right here we have a census interface when it comes to, of course, who owns what and where they own it. We can see a financial district right there. And then last but not least, you can also see here in this Krakow screenshot that, yeah, indeed, you can basically open up existing levels. I hope that you can also open them up to be privatized for foreign investors, rather than foreign investors only being able to build new levels rather than taking over existing levels. But either way, this is a really, really nice implementation. We're gonna, of course, see these screenshots again when we talk about the ownership changes in this patch, so don't worry about it. But before we get there, let's take a good look at the Great Game. This is very much restricted to Sphere of Influence. Let's take a look. The Great Game is a major new content addition, adding a new objective and new journal entries focused on the historical Great Game that played out between Russia and Britain in Central Asia. The objective can be played as either Russia or Britain, or one of the other involved powers, such as Persia, and which country you select changes the conditions required to win the Great Game. The new objective ties directly into numerous new journal entries, such as Persia's ambition to restore its hegemony over Afghanistan, most of which will be present even if the objective isn't selected, and so will also drive AI behavior in the region. We can see straight up here in the screenshot that they changed the map, they changed how things look, they added Turkmenia, the reoccurrence here basically of a decentralized nation after, of course, in 1.0 Kazakhstan was decentralized right there, and we are also seeing a journal entry, Afghan reunification. You can appeal to Russia or you can petition Great Britain for aid, and you can see right here that the goal is to form the nation of Afghanistan, so to unify Afghanistan as a whole. Now, this content block is interesting because they're doing something that I don't think they've ever done before. I can think back to Hearts of Iron 2, Hearts of Iron 3, they had scenarios where basically you would sit down and you would just play the invasion of Poland as Germany, or as the Polish, of course. You could play, for example, the Desert Fox, you know, everything going on in Libya and in Egypt and so on. But scenarios aren't really common. Now, if I understand this correctly, this isn't per se a scenario, but it kind of is. If you think about objectives, what they mean, of course, here seems to be stuff like learn the game, economic dominance, and so on and so forth. Now, economic dominance doesn't have any custom, content that comes with it. This right here seems to be an objective where you basically play a campaign as a scenario and see journal entries that exist in normal campaigns as well. I'm not sure how often I will jump into the objective, the Great Game, but I do like the content that comes with it right here. And I very much look forward to, of course, winning it. I think I'm at least going to give this one try as an objective, but in general, I'm somewhat skeptical at the very least. I just play sandbox no matter what I do. But yeah, the point here ultimately is that this is new content. They were looking at power blocks, they were looking, of course, hey, what is related to this? How can we implement this as a feature? And came to the conclusion, well, obviously, they were doing power block stuff right here in the Great Game. How much content is coming there is a good question. We're going to see that, of course. I'm going to be honest with you, I think content has done a great job here in the recent year. After Voice of the People, they have recovered. They have created content that very specifically takes aim at the functionality of Victoria 3. But hey, ultimately, I don't know too much about the history here, so I can't really judge how good or how bad it will be. We'll see when it comes out. Now, there are only 3 different topics left, and let's start with one that is relatively juicy, and let's take a look at the screenshot right here before I even name the topic. This is subject interactions. If you take a look at this, it might very well remind you of subject relations as they exist in HoI 4, which isn't too bad because, well, HoI 4 basically is at the end of this period, so directly dipping into that makes a lot of sense. They're going to make it so that being a subject and, well, having subjects should be a lot more interesting, which is definitely welcome, seeing how currently there's not really that much to do there. Let's take a look at what they actually did though. Subject interactions are a new group of diplomatic actions that can be done either by an overlord against their subjects or by a subject against their overlord. These include actions such as increasing or decreasing autonomy, changing the level of payments owed by a subject, appointing a new ruler, or allowing them to manage their own market. Certain subject actions, such as increasing autonomy or granting market independence, will be available even to those without sphere of influence. Yet again, this feature is split between the free patch and the DLC. I will say that in general I think there's nothing wrong with any of the features coming here. Subject interactions are interesting. There are some open questions that are vital, at least for me personally. For example, I would like to know whether vassals can rebel together or whether this is something that always will be done by one vassal and then every other vassal, even if they hate the overlord, will also be at war with the rebelling vassal. If we had something akin to, for example, CK3 factions but for vassals, I think that would be pretty nifty. Neither of that is confirmed or denied. We have absolutely no clue. You can see on the other hand though that clearly there is a moving scale going up and down whether you're doing well with your vassal, and based on that the liberty desire will go up and down as well. Speaking of liberty desire, let's just address that directly. Update 1.7 adds liberty desire for subjects that restricts both which actions they can take against their overlord and which actions an overlord is able to take against them. Liberty desire is calculated on a variety of factors, such as how intertwined the subject's economy is with their overlord, and can increase or decrease over time. AI subjects will have a number of new diplomatic strategies influenced by their liberty desire, such as pursuing independence or remaining a subject but seeking greater autonomy from their overlord. Now this right here is very much straightforward to me. Whenever we see more AI strategies, I rejoice, and whenever we see vassals actually doing something, I am also incredibly happy. This will of course go hand in hand, I assume, with the general vassal scale and of course with the autonomy that we can see in the screenshot right here. Vassal gameplay sounds interesting, but again there are a lot of very, basically unanswered questions that I have here, because what this actually feels like from the vassal side is a very intricate topic. Let's say, for example, I am a vassal that wants to go independent and I'm being granted my own market. That can be awful. That is a step towards independence, sure, but that can be awful. How that plays, what that looks like, where exactly that goes, these are all mysteries. So basically, this is the very rare topic where I will be relatively reluctant to give a thorough opinion. Which brings us to the last topic of this, and the topic where I have a ton of opinions: building ownership revision. The mechanics of building ownership are completely revised in the 1.7 update so that the owners of a building no longer have to work in that building or even live in the same state, thank God. London-based capitalists can now own buildings all over the world, and buildings can be selectively nationalized or privatized and be put up for sale to interested investors. Additionally, buildings can now potentially have a different owner for each of its levels. This is just amazing news. We have a ton of screenshots for this as well. We can, for example, tell when it comes to rural topics, that seem to be manor houses, and then when it comes to, urban topics, that seems to be a financial district. Maybe at some point, at a certain level, rural buildings can also be owned by financial districts, but I don't think that matters too much. The implications here are massive. If you've ever played a game where you were a colonial superpower, you must have noticed that, everybody in your colonies, despite you being a colonial exploiter, was incredibly rich. This does no longer seem to be the case, right? Because now I build something, and maybe some capitalist in London builds something, and all of a sudden, yep, there's a farm now in Africa where the workers are paid nothing and all the dividends flow back to London. Which means, inside of our market, inside of our nation, we will have genuine chains of exploitation between different states. You could even have a state, like let's say for example Silesia, that has a great industry, but absolutely nobody there actually owns any of it, because it is all owned by capitalists sitting in Berlin or maybe in Cologne. These kind of deviations in how wealthy your region is and how wealthy different regions of your nations are is something that didn't exist prior to these changes. I'm very much looking forward to them. I do have some open questions. For example, how does the autonomous investment pool decide where to invest? in our nation and, for example, in other nations, other markets, our vassals, what are the priorities there? I would really like it if we could steer this at least loosely, but in general, of course, hey, I really, really love the idea that maybe I am a freshly self-declared and independent Poland and I am being owned entirely by Britain. It would just be so cute. A big topic here attached to is, of course, the question of privatization and nationalization. I've read elsewhere that if you nationalize something, this apparently starts a diplo play. I would prefer it very much if, much like in Victoria 2, when you nationalize something, this will then, basically give a casus belli, a war goal that is unique to the nation that you just expropriated those properties from. That would be interesting to me, because if it immediately starts a diplomatic play, that could very much surprise you and catch you off guard when you're just not feeling like going to war. In Victoria 2, if you didn't play it, if somebody bankrupts and, basically forfeits on their loans, you can say, I will claim that money and go in the name of big money. Now listen, but in general, this is absolutely exciting. It means that we can have massive wealth gaps, it means that we can truly exploit other nations, and it means that we can take off even if we don't have a capitalist base, if I just let foreigners invest. An additional thought that I had there for sure was that all of these investment things, right, they should lead to leverage with the power block, nationalizing stuff, or maybe somebody else buying you out of your foreign debt, or that should also lead to leverage. I would even like it if I could reclaim levels in exchange for just pure leverage, for example, right? But we don't really know much about the leverage mechanic in general there. Now, when it comes to the ownership changes, I surprisingly, and I thought about this a lot, and you can see that I have a ton of opinions there, I can't really detect a lot of things that seem very negative to me. I have long since been of the opinion that this is needed, and even looking into a direction that this does not seem to factor in at all, this actually seems very promising for example, companies. A financial district or a manor house could be a company. They could actually band together and buy up other financial districts and so on, as abstract as that sounds, meaning you could ultimately end up with much more fluctuating and fluid companies, which I personally would find very interesting as well. We could then even do some monopoly crushing. Anyway, these were the main topics in this dev diary. We've talked about all of them, and of course there is a lot more information to, well, all of the ones that we just talked about. The first one that will be thoroughly discussed will be this week on Thursday, and it will be about power blocks. Then next week it will be foreign investment and building ownership, all the way to the 2nd of May, where we will then of course get the changelog. I will cover every single one of these dev diaries because this is a highly, highly exciting time for Victoria 3. And I will now immediately pull myself back. Let's all pray. I need you all to just, sit down right before you go to bed. Let's all pray that 1.7 comes out on the 6th of May and does not need a hotfix. It would be a dream come true. Let me know what you think about these individual mechanics, about the issues with patches not, being in the perfect state for Victoria 3. What is your performance looking like in 1.6? That's also, I think, a very important topic. And for the moment, I will leave you right here, and I will see you later, alligator.